Part 1. The Morning That Changed Everything. Austin, Texas. Late October, 1988. Back then, the city wasn't yet the booming tech hub it is today. It felt more like a big college town with a slower rhythm. Diners opening early, traffic light compared to now, neighbors who actually knew each other. It was the kind of place where people still thought nothing like that could ever happen here. For Nancy DePriest, just 20 years old, it started as a completely normal morning. She had gotten married young, and people said she carried herself with the quiet excitement of someone just starting out in life. Friends remembered her as gentle, polite, the kind of girl who said hello to strangers and really meant it. That Monday, she put on her work clothes, probably the same routine she had done dozens of times before, and headed out the door. Her destination, the Pizza Hut where she worked as a cashier. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and Nancy took pride in showing up on time, unlocking the doors, counting the register, making sure everything was ready before the first customers arrived. Just another shift. Nothing remarkable, but by mid-morning, nothing was ordinary anymore. When coworkers showed up a little later, something felt wrong immediately. The front looked the same, the chairs stacked neatly, the lights on, but it was too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your stomach twist before you even know why. They walked further in, and then they found her, Nancy. She had been tied up. She had been assaulted, brutally. She was left there inside the restaurant, where hours earlier she'd been doing the most mundane things, refilling napkin dispensers, straightening chairs. Now the same place was a crime scene. Someone screamed, someone else ran to the phone. Within minutes, police cars and an ambulance were outside, sirens cutting through the calm Austin morning. Yellow tape went up around the building. Neighbors and reporters gathered on the sidewalks, whispering, trying to understand how something so violent could happen in such an ordinary spot. For the community, the shock was immediate. People ate there, families brought their kids there on weekends, and now a young woman was dead inside. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel possible. The Austin Police Department knew this wasn't just another homicide. It was a brutal sexual assault and murder in broad daylight. That meant whoever did it was dangerous, unpredictable, and the public wanted answers, fast. Detectives started combing the scene, collecting whatever evidence they could, but the urgency to find someone, anyone to blame, was already pressing down on them. And here's the part no one knew at that moment. In the rush to bring justice for Nancy, investigators would take a wrong turn. One mistake led to another, and soon 2 innocent men would be pulled into the center of this storm, paying the price for a crime they didn't commit. Nancy's life was cut short that morning, but the story didn't end there. In many ways, it was only beginning. Part 2. The Investigation and False Confessions. In the hours after Nancy's body was found, Austin police were running on adrenaline. Detectives crowded the small Pizza Hut, marking evidence bags, snapping photos, looking for that one piece of proof that could give them a direction. But the truth? The crime scene wasn't clean. It was confusing, and leads were thin. Everyone wanted answers, and they wanted them yesterday. The case blew up in the news almost overnight. Pizza Hut murder. The words splashed across local headlines. People whispered about it at gas stations, in diners, in line at the grocery store. Parents started driving their daughters to work instead of letting them walk. Austin felt smaller, tighter, suddenly less safe. And that kind of atmosphere, it puts a weight on detectives. Solve it fast, or lose the public's trust. Not long after, the spotlight turned to 2 young men, Christopher Ochoa and Richard Danziger. Neither of them looked like killers. They weren't gang members. They didn't have violent pasts. They were just 2 young guys trying to make it in Austin. But under pressure, suspicion can grow in strange places, and before long, detectives had them in the interrogation room. Christopher was the first target, and those sessions weren't short. Hours and hours, under bright lights, with officers telling him they had proof, telling him they already knew the story. Imagine being in your early 20s, terrified, and being told that the death penalty is on the table, that if you don't cooperate, you could end up strapped to a gurney in Huntsville. After days of this, Ochoa broke. He gave them what they wanted, a confession. On paper, it was neat and tidy. Here was the story. Here was the killer. He even named Richard Danziger as an accomplice, dragging his own friend into the nightmare. Did he believe what he was signing? Probably not. But at that moment, survival mattered more than truth. Richard, for his part, never confessed. He denied it again and again. But once Ochoa's words were written down, it hardly mattered. The system had what it needed: suspects, motive, a confession. To the public, it looked like closure. But inside that police station, the foundation was already cracked. Two innocent men were being pushed into the role of killers, while the real murderer walked free. And the scariest part? Almost nobody noticed. Part 3. The Trial and Wrongful Convictions. By the time the case reached the courtroom, it already felt like the story was set in stone. Detectives had their narrative, and two young men, Christopher Ochoa and Richard Danziger, were sitting at the center of it. Neither of them fit the image of a cold-blooded killer. They were just ordinary guys, but ordinary guys can get swallowed up fast when the system decides it's found its culprits. The turning point was Ochoa's confession. He cracked after hours of questioning, with officers telling him the death penalty was looming over his head. Imagine being in your early 20s, scared, alone, and convinced that saying the right words might save your life. That's exactly what happened. Ochoa signed his name on a statement that tied both him and his friend Danziger to Nancy DePriest's murder. Once that confession existed, the rest didn't seem to matter. There wasn't strong physical evidence. The crime scene itself had more questions than answers. But to a jury, hearing someone confess, even under pressure, was like a hammer slamming down. They believed the story. Ochoa was sentenced to life in prison. Danziger, who never confessed and never stopped shouting his innocence, was also convicted, and the fallout was brutal. Danziger in particular suffered horrific abuse behind bars, violence that left lasting injuries. His family watched helplessly as his life was destroyed by something he never did. For the DePriest family, the convictions gave them a sense of closure, at least on the surface. They thought the nightmare was finally over, but it wasn't. The real killer was still walking free, blending into the world outside, while two innocent men rotted in cells. Looking back, it's chilling. Justice was supposed to be served, but instead, the system created a tragedy on top of a tragedy, taking one brutal murder and multiplying the victims. Part 4. The Real Killer in Aftermath. For a long time, people thought the case was over. Two men in prison. Justice served. End of story. End of story. And honestly, that's how most of Austin looked at it. The headlines faded. The city moved on. But the thing is, the truth doesn't just stay buried. It has this way of creeping back, even when nobody's looking for it. By the late 90s, technology was catching up. DNA testing wasn't just a buzzword anymore. It was becoming the kind of tool that could make or break a case. And when lawyers started poking around the old evidence from Nancy DePriest's murder, something didn't sit right. The confession and the science, they just didn't line up. And if they didn't line up, well, maybe the wrong guys were paying the price. Then came a letter, out of nowhere, from a man already locked up for other violent crimes, Marinio. He wrote to police and basically said, "Hey, you've got the wrong men. I did it. I killed Nancy." At first it sounded unbelievable, like some twisted ploy for attention. But Marinio knew things about the crime scene no outsider could know. And when the DNA came back, the result was clear. He was telling the truth. You can imagine the shock. After more than a decade, the whole story flipped upside down. Christopher Ochoa and Richard Danziger, innocent all along. Ochoa walked out with years stolen from him. Danziger, he never fully recovered. The violence he suffered behind bars left permanent scars, both physical and emotional. Their families had lived through a nightmare nobody deserved. And the DePriest family, think about them. For years they believed justice was done. Then suddenly they're told the real killer was free all that time. That's not closure, that's reopening the wound all over again. Marinio admitted he acted alone. He gave details, he showed no doubt. Case closed, but not really, because what do you do with the wreckage left behind? Two innocent men broken, one family grieving even harder, and a city forced to admit the system they trusted had failed in the worst possible way. That's what people still talk about today. Not just the crime itself, but the bigger lesson. Coerced confessions, tunnel vision in investigations, the way fear can twist justice into something unrecognizable. Nancy DePriest lost her life, and that will never change. But the ripple effects of her murder stretched for decades, through prison walls, through courtrooms, through families who never got the life they should have had. It's the kind of story that leaves you asking, even now, how many other cases like this are out there, waiting for the truth to finally break through?